What is up, Winnipeg Jets fans? Welcome back to Game Over Winnipeg. My name's Liz. I'm one of your regular hosts. I'm joined by Brady. And as many of you know, we got a special guest here today to talk about what maybe we weren't expecting to be a Jets win after how that game started and, frankly, how that game progressed. But hey, a win is a win.
A win is
And
a
that's
win.
what we're here to talk about. Before we get started, Jack, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so fired up to have you. We're going to talk all things Jets versus Canes. I was about to say Habs. I think I'm just in a game over mood right now. And we're going to talk about some player cards, going to open the floor up to some questions. So for those of you who are live in the chat, as always, thank you for being here. Get ready with your keyboards because we're going to be chatting after a few minutes and getting some questions in from you guys. But to get things started, Brady, tee us off. Initial thoughts on not the game, but what was worn in that game.
Ooh, we finally get our introduction to the Fly the 48 jerseys. I know it's a very controversial jersey. Some people love it, some people hate it. When it first came out, I initially liked it, and I was just excited to see it in action. And as I tweeted, as I said, my suspicions were correct. These jerseys needed brown pants. And also
Yes.
Also, the numbers are terrible. I was saying I would imagine if I was anyone who was tracking data, those numbers are not a fun. Were not fun to try and figure out who is who. Maybe you can touch on that a little bit, Jack. But what did you think of the jerseys?
I would fly the 48. I
Yeah,
like
you
them.
would.
I thought that they were pretty neat. I didn't understand why everybody was hating on them. I guess maybe they were divisive in the Jets corner of the internet. It seemed like everybody was just dumping on them when they were revealed from my general NHL perspective. But I kind of like them. I mean, like I like them. I think they look better up close than they do like on a TV broadcast. Like they were a little darker than I expected them to be. And like you said, the numbers were just a little bit illegible. But overall, I thought they were pretty charming. I definitely wouldn't want them to wear them full time, but I give them one thumbs up. One
One
thumb
thumbs up. You know what?
up.
We'll take a one thumbs up. But you know who gets two thumbs up tonight is the guy who was wearing brown pants. Well, brown pads, close enough. Our backup goaltender, ladies and gentlemen, Laurent. I can't speak. Laurent Brassois was in Jets goal tonight. After last game, Brady Chalice, your very own Brady Chalice on Game Over Winnipeg, gave him an F grade for how the first quarter of the season has gone for him. Lock him up, time up, throw him in prison because Laurent Brassois proved him wrong tonight. Jack, what did you think of Laurent Brassois' game tonight in backup goaltending for the Jets and facing a lot of shots from the Carolina Hurricanes tonight?
I mean, I'm not going to come on here and say he sucked. He made like 38 saves or whatever. I mean, look, like when you're playing against the Carolina Hurricanes, it's just endurance. Like you're just going to face so many shots, of a bunch of different types, a lot of point shots, a lot of stuff through traffic. The commentator's going to use the word he fought that one off 60 times. And I think your F grade was pretty warranted. Like I don't think he had a single quality start through the entire first quarter of the season. Performed, I think, pretty poorly. And yeah, I would consider Brossois to be a pretty decent goalie. Like in terms of backup goaltenders, I would consider him a perfectly qualified one. And I think what he did tonight was a little bit more in line with what I would have expected from him than 5 crummy games earlier in the year.
Yeah, when it comes to goaltending, and I think like this with this matchup specifically, what is your opinion on like the idea that like getting a lot of shots on against, because we know the Carolina Hurricanes MO. We know that they're a team that likes to shoot from everywhere, get as many pucks on the net as possible. Obviously being an analytics guy, do you give any credence to the like, getting a couple shots on early, making a couple big saves to start off the game can give a goalie confidence?
Yeah, I think it depends on the goalie. I think I'm not a goalie expert by any means. I'm sure that there's some of them who feel a bunch of pucks in their pads and start to feel very confident. I'm sure there's some of them who start to break down after a 60-minute onslaught. But we've seen so many okay goalies seem to go absolute god mode against the Hurricanes that I think that there is a bit of a pattern there. And I think a lot of that, the reputation the Hurricanes have for being a horrible finishing team, I think that's a lot more process than it is actual finishing talent on the roster. Um, And I think we saw it tonight. I mean, they had a couple of grade A chances, especially early on. I thought they were actually getting some passes through the slot, which they don't usually do. But overall, despite the sheer quantity that they gave up, I thought the Jets did a decent job of at least forcing them to take those kind of contested perimeter shots for most of it. And Brossois was obviously up to the task.
Yeah, 100%. And that was kind of the conversation that I'm sure a lot of people were having around the kitchen tables or sitting on the couches watching that game. This is the epitome of the conversation of shot quality versus quantity, right? Where I think if we looked at individual shot metrics per, isolated thing, I would take a gander that the Jets probably had within the top 10 most dangerous shots of that game, probably most of them. And I think that speaks to probably some of the team defense we've seen from the Winnipeg Jets in the last little bit, where, like you said, the pushing to the perimeter, I think, really bodes well for them. And you also want to see them do that when their backup goaltender is in net. So moving kind of off from the goalie perspective into more of the offense, I want to talk a little bit about the top line, and maybe I'll throw it to you first, Brady. This is maybe the third game, maybe the second complete game that we've seen Nikolai Ehlers on that top line with Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor. To me, they looked real fast tonight. I saw some decent 5-on-5 solid possession cycling in the zone, which is rarely, I feel like, what I see from this team. Oftentimes it's, again, same sort of vibe with the more perimeter shots, and all their high danger ones come off the rush and whatnot. And I thought we saw some pretty good in zone work from that top line tonight. Brady, what'd you think of them?
Oh, I mean, like they were the only reason. I mean, obviously the two goals are both from that top line, with Kyle Connor breaking his goalless streak. I think it was at 6 games, and then of course Nikolai Ehlers with. I mean, I think the Nikolai Ehlers goal is like the epitome of what we want to see from that line. I wrote it down here. The puck changed hands from, like, as soon as one of the forwards grabbed it. So it starts off with Ehlers, it goes to Kyle Connor, it goes back to Ehlers. He hands it off to Scheifele, who enters the zone, drops it to Kyle Connor, moves it back to Mark Scheifele. Scheifele puts it out front. And you get that perfect tic-tac-toe play that is really what you almost, like, not necessarily need to see exactly that type of play. But that type of play is exactly the reason why you can look at that line and go, this line should succeed. And then even going past, like, the goal, for example, if you look at the grand scheme of the game, I mean, if you go to Money Puck right now and you sort by lines, you sort by expected goals, and these guys were sitting at 63, almost 64% expected goals tonight. So not only did they, show flair in just the specific moments where it all worked out, but it seemed like, they were able to win their matchup tonight, which is, not something that always happens with a Scheifele Connor duo. So really, I look at that line and I go a big check mark off there. It's more the rest of the team that I would be a little bit more concerned about tonight. Jack, I want to ask you what your opinion is on, line stacking, as well as versus kind of like moving the pieces throughout the lineup.
I think it depends. I mean, I would consider the Jets to be a team that has a pretty balanced forward group in terms of, I like a lot of players who are in their middle six. I think against Carolina, it especially makes a decent amount of sense because the name of the game is being opportunistic against them. And they were a perfect example of that tonight, where you're not going to get that many chances against the Hurricanes, so you have to really make the most of them. And I think adding a catalyst like Ehlers to Connor and Scheifele, somebody who can just move the puck up the ice quickly and make the creative plays, that lets Connor and Scheifele's skills, like really manifest themselves, I think is a very good fit for playing against a team like the Hurricanes. And obviously it paid off. I think going forward as their strategy, I mean, I'm not going to complain about anything that gets Nikolai Ehlers more ice time, but, and I think they do have to get him going, because the stuff under the hood, I don't think has been what we've become accustomed to with him. Like, I think he did need a bit of a jolt to get going, and hopefully this starts to provide him with one. I would hope that we're going to see maybe a bit more of an offensive spark from guys further down the lineup. Otherwise, you might end up in a situation where you have kind of one line that can really score and generate offense, and then 3 shutdown units, which, I don't know how far you really want to put that. So I'd hope to see a guy like Gabe Vilardi maybe get the opportunity to break out a little bit offensively if they are going to stack that line. and become, a real drink stirrer, creating chances and not just suppressing them, which is what the Jets have been good at this year.
Yeah, 100%. I think some of those, that suppressing shots is like I'm gonna take it at this point. Like I was so worried about that aspect of their game for a while, but you're right that I think that there needs to be a little bit more ignition when it comes to what the offense looks like on the other 9 forwards rolling out of there. And I think tonight was a good example of what we can see when they cycle the puck properly in the offensive zone on the off times that they did have possession of the puck. It got better as the game went on, so I don't want to be too hard on them. But yeah, I think Gabe Vilardi is a name that you mentioned that I think a lot of Jets fans definitely have a big question mark around as well. Not the guy's fault. He's played maybe 5 games in a Jets jersey this year because of I always butcher this, MCL sprain, maybe. Is that what it was? Something like that.
It was his knee. That's all I remember.
Yeah. But tonight I found that the Alex Iafallo, Cole Perfetti, Gabe Vilardi line was real quiet. They were real quiet. And I don't know if that's because I only saw them in small spurts, because I'm sure that was one of the lines that was being tossed into the blender with the whole 11 forwards and 7 defense piece. But that's kind of what I was wanting to talk a little bit about as well. And maybe I'll throw it back to Jack immediately. What are your thoughts on going 11 forwards, 7 defense? We're not even going to talk about the fact that 7th defenseman happened to be Logan Stanley, because that in and of itself is the argument that tosses us out the window, because, But what are your thoughts on kind of running with that and how it affects the lineups and how it affects the way that usage is spread out among those skaters?
I think it depends. I mean, I'm no coach. Usually, when I'm in hockey settings, it's on a beer league team that has like 6 forwards and 3 defensemen, so it doesn't really come up. But I think it depends if you have guys in your forward group who can really move around the lineup and be effective in no matter what unit that they're going to be on. Like, you need to have guys who you're comfortable playing with, your kind of 2 fourth line type of guys, and who you think can really stir the group in there and also handle the extra minutes. I mean, the Jets have in the past seemingly liked playing some of their forwards, giving them a lot of ice time. So I think it makes sense in that perspective. But yeah, I think it's kind of a situation to situation deal. And, I think it was probably a little bit strategic tonight, knowing that you're going to be dealing with a Hurricanes team that, I mean, more than anything else, like more so even than the peppering shots on net and all that kind of stuff, is just such a punishing forechecking team, a team that forces you to make decisions really quickly, and a team that, can cause a whole lot of pain to opposing defenders. I think it makes sense to go with the 7D in that situation, but you're obviously going to want to vary it depending on, who you're rolling against.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that maybe brings a little bit more clarity and comfort to the situation, because like you said, it's very circumstantial. And Brady, what did you think of the circumstance? You gotta get Logan Stanley into the lineup and Declan Chisholm, and sitting AJF is not an issue that I have. But I don't even need to talk more about it. I'll let you talk more about it. I bet you my dad's listening to the broadcast, so I don't want to yell at Logan Stanley more than I already have. So,
well, I mean, like it was really tough because, like, I mean, both of these guys, both Logan's. I mean, first of all, Declan Chisholm absolutely deserved another look tonight. And I mean, he kind of got like 10 minutes or so. Stanley got just under 13. For me personally, like, again, I like to look into the conspiracy side of things. I like to twist the narrative into what I want to see. Maybe, we every day we get closer to a Ville Heinola return, and you got to make a decision on D. So whether this, I'm not, you could go one way and say that this was potentially a showcase game, as if they haven't showcased him a 1,000 times already. But also at the same time, you're putting both of these guys into a game where you're playing against a really tough opponent. And so at the same time, you're kind of putting both of them into the pressure cooker, seeing which one can come out on top. And, it was kind of tough, again, with how sporadic their ice time was tonight. Again, I really like Declan Chisholm's his poise and calmness with the puck. He's not a huge guy or anything like that. So that's where he needs to, make his plays. And Logan Stanley was he was 6'7" tonight. I didn't think he had a bad game or anything like that. He was fine. He was out there. I mean, taking a pretty dumb penalty after you score a goal to go up 2-0 is not great, especially in a game where you're getting heavily outshot. But I mean, it is what it is. It didn't hurt the Jets. They still ended up winning tonight. And like I said, again, against a very difficult opponent.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to talk about, I think, we've kind of covered a couple of the really important things that happened in this game. And part of the reason we wanted to bring on, Jack today is to talk a little bit about some of his work and how it pertains to the Winnipeg Jets and just kind of some of the league-wide stuff that he does. But we scheduled this long ago before we knew what the news was going to be this morning. And not that Willie Jefferson signed a year-long extension with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, though that was also excellent news to receive on this fine Monday. But that the boy, El Nino, is staying for another 3 seasons. $12 million contract for the boy. Very, very pleased with that. Jack, every time a player gets signed, within like 30 seconds, the JFresh player card is up on Twitter. Everyone's circling around it. You tweet it out. It has, the even strength defense. It's got the assists. It's got the everything. It's got the projections, and it's got the 1 sentence long caption that's a quick, snapshot recap of what that card is actually telling fans when they take a look at it. What did the player card say about Nino Niederreiter, and what do you think about that deal?
Well, it said that he's a good hockey player. He's good at playing hockey. He's I mean, I liked the fit for Winnipeg when they acquired him. I liked the price they paid for him initially. I liked getting a guy who had that extra year of turn on him, and I think he's been a pretty good fit so far. Like, he has added that defensive aspect, and certainly, I mean, the way the Jets have played this season, that defense has been a huge reason that they've been strongly competitive, and I think he's been a great contributor to it. And not a lot of wingers, especially at his price point, kind of bring that combination of defensive possession play and also scoring ability. And, I know that we haven't seen him put up huge goal totals this season, but he's a guy who's going to be pretty efficient for you. You play him at 5-on-5. He's got the skill to put pucks in the net, but he's also, even if he wasn't scoring, he's providing a lot of value for him. Obviously, whenever you're talking about a player who's in their early 30s and you're adding a couple of years there to get them to the middle of that decade, there's always the chance that something might go terribly wrong. But considering the value you get out of them, I don't think there's any way to really complain about this deal. And I would be very happy if I was a Winnipeg Jets fan. And I would have been very happy as a Penguins fan if they had spent a second round pick on him instead of one Michael Granlund 1 week later at the deadline last year. But we don't need to get into that.
Yeah, with Nino, it's a very interesting, because he's come onto this team and really provided something that they really needed, which is just consistent, hardworking play driving, and good defense, as you kind of mentioned there. Oh boy, I lost my train of thought. Oh no. Anyways, but as I was saying, Nino has been fantastic for the Jets. Oh my God, I completely.
Is this where I come in and save you? Is this where I come in and save you?
Yeah, it is. Please. Good grief.
Well, you know what? I'm saving you, but I'm throwing Jack under the bus and I'm putting him on the spot. So I want to talk player cards. Can you give us like a quick little highlight of some of like your, I don't know if favorite is the right word, but some of the more like interesting Winnipeg Jets player cards. Obviously I think I made this thumbnail so long ago and I was like, JFresh is coming on the show, slap Kyle Connor, first percentile defense, like gotta throw him on there. Because sometimes you see some really bright blue and some really bright red numbers with the Winnipeg Jets on these player cards. So I'm kind of just opening the floor up to you to talk about just some of the players in this team that your model talks about and what it says about some of them.
Well, I gotta disappoint you there, because Kyle Connor is now sitting at a cool 4% defense number. So take that.
The Jets can't be stopped.
Horribly outdated. No, I mean, especially I think that there's interesting things when it comes to the defense. I won't talk about Logan Stanley because, like you, there's a person in my life who was a huge fan of his, and I would not want to make them upset. I mean, the one that's interested me the most in the past couple of years is just Josh Morrissey's sudden decision to turn into a high-end offensive defenseman, which I don't think anybody was expecting like 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like he said, like just apparently in one offseason just decided that he's going to be a like top like offensive, like huge offense driver. Like defense numbers kind of fallen off a little bit, although they've been, I think, better this season than they were last year. That one's crazy. I mean, I'm always a big Dylan DeMello fan, just because like any guy who puts up consistent elite defensive numbers, regardless of what minutes you play him or which partners or competition you put him with, I'm always going to have an affinity for. And then I can't name him, but there is one current Winnipeg Jets player who actually once sent me an email to ask me to explain how the player cards work to them and show them his player card. So
I'm obsessed.
I'm a big fan of his. I'm a big fan of his.
Can you give me? Was it a forward or a D man? That's all I want to know.
I can't give you any information except that they did, when they got traded or signed by Winnipeg, they did ask me, because I had mentioned that I had a personal connection to Winnipeg. They asked me for a bit of info about the city and what I thought of it. That's all I can give you.
I'm obsessed. That's someone who cares about math and is excited to be in Winnipeg. Maybe kind of that's what I'm taking out of that, and you can't stop me from thinking that person was excited. I'll take it. That's pretty cool. I think it's time for maybe this is the worst question in the world to ask and that you're so tired of answering, but we have a lot of people here in the chat. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. If you're listening live right now, if you're listening back tomorrow, we appreciate all the support. And just a little PSA, we are going to be asking a couple questions in the chat pretty soon, so make sure you have those lined up and when we'll get to those. But analytics in sports are changing very frequently, and there's a lot of things, that go into them and that go into the visualization of them that not everyone understands. And I include myself in that category. They can be difficult to digest, to understand, to kind of understand the nuance around and things like that. But when it comes to a JFresh player card, as we see being circulated on Twitter, can you give us kind of the rundown on a couple of the more maybe difficult to understand metrics when it comes to maybe an expected goals, or what the, A1, A2 lines look like there? Just kind of give us the super easy, super brief understanding of what those numbers actually mean and what story they're telling about a hockey player.
Yeah, I think the wins above replacement part is the tricky part, especially I've moved away from the A1G percent. I just write goals and first assists now, so at least that part should be fairly straightforward now. Yeah, the wins above replacement, there's a small learning curve with it. I mean, it's a decently complicated model, or complex, at least. Like, you're never really going to be able to just kind of drill it into something that is easily understandable at a glance for everybody. Essentially the idea is that you're trying to come up with kind of a number that encapsulates the isolated impact that a player is having in different areas of the game, whether it's their impact on the Jets creating scoring chances when they're on the ice, their impact on them preventing scoring chances, the same thing on the power play and the penalty kill, how well they finish their own opportunities compared to how a replacement level player would do that. And then, are they drawing penalties? Are they taking penalties? How is that impacting them? Because I think that's something that people will sometimes underrate, especially with defensemen, is that there are a lot of players in the ice who kind of just get a reputation for general physicality and stuff, but it's easy to forget that, sometimes those physical players end up actually putting their team at a pretty serious disadvantage by ending up in the box with unnecessary minor penalties. So I think once you kind of, get that, or get your head around that idea that this is, we're trying to kind of tease out the impact that these players are having in different areas of the game through these metrics. They're not perfect. Ultimately they're estimates. Ultimately, you do need to, there's an interpretive element to it. You have to bring in your own knowledge of the game, your own knowledge of these players. But the idea is that it's supposed to essentially give you a decent snapshot of the player in question, and hopefully leave you a bit more informed about a player that you might not be as familiar with, or maybe give you a bit more insights into the players who are on the team that you watch night after night.
For sure. Obviously you have the player cards that you do, which are a staple among hockey Twitter. But on top of that, you also do some projections with your model as well too. Yes. I just want to bring everyone's attention to a tweet that came out October 10th, 2023. From the yes, I do have to, actually. From the JFresh Hockey account, having the Winnipeg Jets winning the President's Trophy with 109 points.
Wow.
And the caption that you put on this image was whatever thing is busted. What can I say? No further questions. I have a couple questions. First off,
you and everybody else.
First off, when you get a result like this that is spat out from your model, what is the first kind of initial thought, and then where does it go from there?
That it's perfect, no notes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing that I do if something that I've put together is spitting out something that seems to go so deeply against the smell test is I will just go through and make sure that I didn't do something horribly wrong or that something wasn't terribly broken with it. I mean, my assumption when it said that about the Jets was that I was, I had done all this stuff to try to, not overvalue goaltending. And then I didn't overvalue goaltending, and it still said that Hellebuck and the Jets were going to win the friggin' President's Trophy. The second thing I did was DM Dom Lucian asking him if he was having the same problem, which he assured me that he was not. He was like, "Oh yeah, I think I overrated the Jets. They're at like 100 points." I was like, "Buddy, we don't have the same problem here." Yeah, I mean, it was the same. Like the thing was, the only thing that gave me a little comfort was that last year I had the exact same thing where I put out these projections that had the Boston Bruins winning the President's Trophy. Everyone freaked out because Marchand was going to be out for months and McAvoy was going to be out for months, and they were so old, and here's all the players they lost, and then they ended up being literally the best team ever in the regular season. So that was like the one thing I could hang my hat on. And like honestly, like I was looking at the numbers yesterday or the day before, kind of comparing it to the other models, and it's like it's doing above average. Like it's doing better than about half of the other models. It's doing better than most fans who kind of submitted projections to the survey. I still think it's a little off its rocker, but the thing is, like for a while, actually, the Jets did seem like they were going to flirt with that number of points, and they've regressed a bit. But I mean, there's more than one reason that I was so overjoyed to see them beat the Carolina Hurricanes tonight, and it was not just that we would be having a nice conversation here.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's what's that 2012 Tumblr meme where it's like she believed because he lied? That's me. I'm so excited. I believe because your model, they even if it's not passing the smell test, as you said, it's passing my vibe test, and I'm very happy to see that. But that is inviting me to want to take a look into this chat here and get into the question period here. So if you guys are listening live, drop your questions now because we're going to get into them. And Carl, I'm throwing you under the bus, Carl with a C, where Carl says, hockey cards are for people who don't have enough time to watch games. They mimic what you see on the ice if you know what to look for almost always. And you saved your comment there by adding the if you know what to look for piece. And I want to ask a question of my own that's sort of inspired by this one. What are your thoughts on when people talk about how, these player cards are kind of a replacement and you can look at them if you don't watch games and things like that, but if you can't fall back on your own eye test? There is a Jack Hahn thread that I really like that's basically like, not all eye tests are created equal, and just because you watch a team doesn't mean you're drawing the right conclusions from it. So you can't use what you see to like discard a model or something that you either otherwise agree with or that is essentially correct based on kind of how it's built. What are your thoughts on this whole, like, I'm so sick of the eye test argument and stuff like that, but basically more nuanced than that when people talk about kind of discarding player cards when it comes to players that they feel like they know very well?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see, the perils of leaning too heavily on your own eye test at the expense of everything else, I can show you my HF Boards account from the mid 2010s, and you will see some amazing takes. I was how they should sell the farm for Mikhail Bodker and stuff like that. No, look, I never blame anybody who watches every Jets game and says, I don't need these numbers to tell me what I'm watching, or I mean, especially like the ultimate one for me is when people are like, I don't care about analytics. I like watching hockey. I'm not a GM. I don't really give a crap about these player cards. That's like the fairest thing in the world to me. I don't think everybody has to be into them. For the people who are into them, I like to put them out there. For people who maybe want to learn a bit more, about the analytical side of the game, including Winnipeg Jets players, they are, they're there for that purpose. I think that there are a lot of people who watch all the games and who not only watch all the games of their team, but watch a whole lot of games around the league, who seem to get a decent amount out of an analytical approach to the game. I mean, it always makes me laugh, for example, when people say that, Dom from The Athletic doesn't watch hockey. He just relies on his stats, when I know that he has like 7 monitors set up to watch like the Ducks play the Predators on a Wednesday night. It's the same for most people. I mean, like, we wouldn't be doing hockey analytics if we weren't, obsessive about hockey. And there are certainly times when, watching a player more carefully, especially if it's one that I don't watch night after night, has given me improved context and maybe helped my interpretation of the kinds of stuff that's in player cards. I think there's also different kinds of tools that you can use to aid that interpretation. I mean, tracked stats, whether it's what Garrett Hull does for the Jets, what Corey Schneider somehow manages to do for like every team in the NHL year after year. I mean, like, those are such an amazing resource. And the reason that they're an amazing resource is that it takes what you see in the eye test and it puts it into hard numbers, and it makes it comparable, or, between and then around the team, or around the league, which I think is just amazing. But yeah, I don't blame anybody who values their own eye test very highly, but I think that there is definitely stuff that you can miss, biases that you can have, types of players that you kind of may overvalue. And I think the analytics might help bring in a little bit more context. But if you don't care, you don't care. And I'm not gonna freak out at you about that.
Honestly, fair enough. And I
You're
feel
a
like
good man. You're a good man.
I think that's the right way to look at it too. It's just more information, more information to apply to the context.
Yeah.
But of course,
if my girlfriend's dad loves Logan Stanley, I'm not gonna sit at the dinner table and tell him that he should not like Logan Stanley.
but at the same time,
send me a table. I'll be there.
but also at the same time, it's like listen, Liz and I both are not the biggest fans of Logan. But if the reality ended up being that he was it was putting out good results constantly, and it was just because we see all the big gaffes. It's very easy for even people who are, doing shows like this after every game to go in and go, hey, this he had this mess up, this mess up, this mess up. But that's what you remember really easily. But it's not the entire picture, obviously. But regardless, anyways, moving on from that, there is another question in here from Turd Ferguson at JFresh. If the Blues fall off, Justin Falk feels like a Minnesota guy Chevy could get to waive his no-move clause. Is he a top 4 upgrade over Pionk? And then in brackets, hoping Schmidt's contract would go out as part of that.
I really don't think that he is a guy that I would target. I mean, I don't think that Pionk is a super amazing player either. I think he's fallen off quite a bit, but Falk, it's basically kind of replacing, like one guy with a guy who's very similar. Like Falk puts up a decent number of points. He still has a good shot. Like, that's a thing that he really brings to the table. I don't know if you want to have guys, bring a guy in for your second pair who's just gonna toss shots on net, even if they do go in a bit more frequently than others. I mean, honestly, especially I think considering their contract situations, Pionk has fewer years. I think he also makes less money. I'm pretty sure every defenseman on the St. Louis Blues makes like $6.5 million. So I'm gonna just assume that Justin Falk does as well. I think that there's a better answer than Justin Falk, and frankly, I'm assuming that he has trade protection, and that he's probably pretty comfortable just tossing off slap shots in St. Louis. So I would probably look a little elsewhere for an offensive defenseman to add to this team.
Well, speaking of offensive defensemen, I'm looking for the comment in the chat earlier, but I don't know where it is, but someone asked. Asking about Neil Pionk, and so kind of in the same train of thought. Someone's asking if you think he might need more power play time in order to have his, numbers kind of bumped up a little bit as an offensive defenseman. Like, do you think it would help? Obviously, doesn't help with 5-on-5 metrics, but maybe just to kind of get his feet under him and showcase his ability to jack up the points a little bit and things like that. Do you think Neil Pionk needs power play time in order to kind of bump up his value as a defenseman for the Jets?
Do you mean like value in terms of like what he provides the Jets, or value in terms of trade value?
More the second one, just kind of maybe like kind of recognition across the league / to be considered by many as an actually good defenseman. And I've been a Neil Pionk hater, and I've been kinder to him this year, so I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, guys. I'm not going back to my ways, but I think it's a valid question that just knowing the style of play that he kind of plays.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of trade value for an offensive defenseman, it never hurts to give them a bunch of minutes. And you're right. I mean, his numbers are certainly better this year than they have been before. I think that speaks in part to the strong defensive structure that the teams had this year. You know, even if you're a guy who's not great defensively, if you slot into that structure fine, then you're going to do a little bit better. But I mean, still, in terms of what he brings to the table, he's kind of in that like Tyson Barrie type mold where poor defensively, brings a little bit of that offensive spark, but it's never going to, fully kind of make a difference on, even in a top four. I mean, there's a reason that Barrie is having to go door to door selling himself to teams around the league. Power play time, might do him well. I mean, the Jets power play isn't anything to write home about. So, maybe you might as well give it a shot, but he's a guy who I would try to move if you can, and if feeding him some power play time allows you to do that without hurting the Jets' playoff chances, then maybe you go for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. We've taken enough of Jack's generous time this evening, talking Jets, Canes, talking player cards, talking Winnipeg Jets. I just have one last question for you, a little fun one here. Jack, who is your favorite Winnipeg Jet? I'm just curious. I'd really like to know who your favorite Winnipeg Jet is.
My favorite current Winnipeg Jet?
Yes, current. Yes.
Well, my actual answer would be either Ehlers or the mystery Jets player that I referred to earlier. But I will give
Ehlers, apparently.
Who was not Ehlers. Although I would have loved it if it had been, because I would have had amazing news for him. But I will also give a shout out to Morgan Barron, the pride of Halifax, Nova Scotia, my hometown, who my younger brother played soccer against back in the day, and said, "Hey, is Morgan Barron going to be an NHL player? Like I played him in soccer a couple of years ago. I saw that he was drafted, and I was like, no, probably not. He's like not really a major prospect. He's late round pick. Like he'll probably be an AHLer." And then sure enough, he was a folk hero last year. So shout out to him.
And
yeah, no, for sure.
Liz, one moment, sorry. I want to put Jack on the spot very quickly. How far do you think that this Winnipeg Jets team will go? If you had to put a off the top of your head, off of vibes, off of watching tonight's game, how far do you think? Well, how far do you think this team will go?
Well, I want to say Stanley Cup. I would certainly be happy to see them make a deep run and really put it together. And with Hellebuck, you always have the chance. I think right now they are probably trending towards tough first round out for Colorado or Dallas. But you never know. We'll see.
Okay, that was great. And now I'm sad.
Sorry.
Okay, whatever. Show's over. Time to go home.
But if Nick Ehlers can really get things back on track, then they're going to get 109 points on the dot. Everyone else is going to regress below 109 points. President's Trophy, Stanley Cup, Dynasty.
And who knows, with the right ads at the deadline, you never know. Yeah,
the
right ad is Nikolai Ehlers on the top line.
If you can get Niederreiter at the deadline, who's to say you can't get somebody else good this year?
Exactly.
There we go. Exactly. Here's to hoping. Jack, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, hearing your insights, talking hockey. For everyone who's here in the chat, thank you so much for watching live tonight. We had some great numbers. We had some great engagement in the show. Brady and I are here. One of us with guests, us doing fun stuff, kind of just shooting the shit every time here after every single Jets game. So you can find us and also similar type of coverage for every single Canadian market game after every single Canadian market game. Right here on SDPN. Make sure you check everybody out. We have some amazing co-hosts on the network. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We had a wonderful evening. You can find this up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those types of things after the fact. We'll see you next game. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.